Hello, chess friends. This is FIDE Master Valery Lvov, and in my lecture today, I would like to share with you an opinion of mine about a very interesting typical position that I came across recently between the grandmasters Jan Timman, one of the top and most famous grandmasters of Netherlands, and of course Arthur Yusupov, another very famous chess player who I'm a great fan of, and that's why I'm presenting a lot of examples from his own games, since he was a grandmaster, and he's still a grandmaster with a great positional feeling and a lot of creative ideas. So practically in this game, Timman had the white pieces and Yusupov had black pieces. The game was played in Tilburg in 90x6. In the fourth game of their match, and of course, one very interesting thing that we can notice about this position is that white is an extra knight. Black is a pawn knight down, but unfortunately for white, practically his knight is isolated, and as a compensation, black is having 1, 2, and 3 pawns. We usually know that the 3 pawns are enough equivalent for a minor piece. So black is having 3 pawns, and white has this knight, which is pretty much nailed on the queen side without any particular activities. But anyway, we see something different, which is not too good for black as well. Black is having those pawns in d5 and d4, which are actually double pawns. Double pawns in this position, and white could possibly attack on them and be very successful with it. So practically, who is better? It's not such an easy task to evaluate this position, in my opinion. For the knight, black has enough equivalent, as I mentioned. That's right. But the thing is, if white manages to consolidate his forces, for example, he plays castles and then makes the move of knight f3 on his own, practically the d4 pawn will be in danger, and we see that white will certainly have a big positional, and who knows, maybe that pawn fails even material advantage. So black needs to do something quickly, and now we'll see a very interesting type of idea which black used to formulate much better pawn structure, which in the end game happens to be a key idea. What he did in this case was the move g7 up to g5, an excellent counter break. So after the move of pawn up to g5, he's intending to eliminate the pawn on f4 and practically to put the e5 pawn in danger. If white decides to take right now, then after knight d5, we can easily see that black's pieces will just follow around, and it will be not a really easy task for white to deal with this mass of pawns which will open in the center. So the move of g5 puts an immediate problem to white. He doesn't have that time to consolidate the pieces, and for this reason, sometimes when you see that your opponent is going to attack, I would advise you all to follow really useful concept which has helped me not just once or twice, but on many games. And this is when you see that your opponent is going to follow with attack, try to create problems. Now, many players, instead of creating problems with the opponent, they think about how they can supply better defense. So when the opponent attacks them, they could be better defend. And that's not too good, because once your opponent hasn't started the threats, you don't need to defend that well. But you need to think about how to prevent your opponent's threats to come. Because once they come, maybe you'll have a nice defense. But how long it will hold, that's a question to who nobody has the answer. So practically the idea that after g5, f takes to g5 doesn't work that well. But also we can see that in case white plays g3 in order to defend this pawn, black will follow with g takes f4, and the simple rook g8. So the both rooks of black will become active, quite active actually, on the g and c files. And of course, the opponent should always think, white should always think about a move like f6, which will help black to activate the knight as well. All of the white pieces are now discoordinated, especially the rooks on a1 and h1. They don't have any connection. The knight on a6 is put on the edge of the board, doing nothing out there, and practically the only coordinated pieces are the king and the knight. and I don't think that this is a really important coordination at this point, since after king e2, black would do rook to g2 check, and believe me, this is a position which I wouldn't like to play as white. For example, imagine king d3 could be followed by rook c3 check, then there could be even rook a3. That's of course a sample variation, and now we see that the both knights which white has will be in big trouble. If white decides to push up his own knight on c7 with the check, then black's own king could come to d8, and then of course the knight on d2 or the one on c7 will be lost. So in general, what I want to tell you about the position before is that it's not really this easy for white to get rid of the upcoming problems. And actually, it's not easy at all. The move of g3 shouldn't be made, because then black's rooks will connect together and get a lot of greater activities. And for this reason, white's only opportunity seems to be castles. So now after white castles on this side of the board, white is defending f4 already, and it seems that when black takes on f4 with g takes f, and white does the move rook takes f4, the d4 pawn is attacked, and somehow white is going to connect his rooks together and to get a better activity opposing against black's center. But the problem is that, you know, in the endgames especially, it's a difficult thing to oppose with pieces against pawns. Now, of course, we can use the pieces to block the pawns, but not really to stop them from moving for a long time. Either we'll need to maybe keep a piece to prevent the pawn from moving and just limit significantly the activities of this given piece, or if the opponent supports the square which the piece controls with another pawn, of course the pawn will just move and the pieces won't be able to do anything, since they are more important than pawns, so you can't exchange a piece for a pawn. So that's the point. And right now, white pieces wouldn't be really great blockers of the black center. That's why I say that after rook takes f4, knight takes e5 from the black side, the center of white was completely busted. These coordinated knights right now can't help with white to with anything. And of course, after he took the pawn, black played the move rook h8 to g8. The rook is placed on the open file. The main idea next move will be to come forward with the other rook to c2, and then we can see that the knight will be in trouble. There will be an idea of rook takes to d2. There will be even knight f3 type of threats. And who knows, that rook on d4 could even become a very vulnerable one, actually. We see ideas like knight c6 as well. So we know that usually in the end games, the rooks, as well as in the middle games, actually, the rooks shouldn't take central positions, as well as the major pieces, because they can easily be attacked by the opponent's minor pieces or the pawns, and they lose a lot of time. So right now, after the move rook to g8 from black side, we see that everything goes down for white. So he decided to use a very important idea. Every time when we see that there is some difficulty, we gotta get more pieces behind. So the knight comes to b4 right now. He's putting a threat to the rook, and his intention is to come with that knight to d3, so that he can offer another exchange to black's knight on e5, and somehow to harmonize his position. The problem, however, happens that after knight b4, black gets his rook now to the c3 square, and as we can easily see, again, the knight can't successfully attempt the center area or any kind of other area where you have play. Now, knight d3 and knight c2 are taken by the black rook here, and in the same time, we see that black's plan in the center is simple. He'll like to play f6, king e7, and probably after removal of the knight, he would like to prepare at some point e5 after he hits on the one knight, defends d5, and so on. But there is no quick job to do. The only thing that black needs to make right now, as in the most of the dynamic endgames, dynamic endgame is when there are complicated ideas to think about, or there are many activities of the different pieces. So in such endgames, everything which we should try to do is can be said in two steps. We have to think about how to utilize and coordinate our pieces so that they can create threats against the opponent, and in the same time try to limit his activity as much as we can. Sometimes we can't do it that easily or that strongly, but we could do as best as we can. So right now, after the move of rook to c3 from the black side, now in case of the move of rook e1, as I mentioned, black can play the move f6. And we see that there is nothing certain that white can make. If he moves the knight, black will have knight f3 check, and that's a very dangerous position. There is the fork against the king and the rook in the same time. So if the king comes back to h1, well, I wouldn't like what is going to happen in case black plays something simple, like probably a5. This knight will have to go behind, and well, black would even get some ideas like knight d3 and so on, which will mean to be very harmful to white. So pretty much after the move of f6, we can learn a very interesting concept about this position, and this is that in endgames, the knights, which usually don't have any important points where they are defended by pawns, as we call them outposts, frequently such knights happen to be even weaker than the pawns. So there are 3 pawns against knight. But still, if the knight can't find an outpost and its position is always unstable and unreliable, then of course the pawns will be much more powerful if they are connected. So right now, after the move of rook to c3, white did something else. He decided to give the piece back, and actually played the move of knight takes to d5, a very interesting type of idea. Practically, the idea is, after black captures with his pawn, to play the move of rook takes to d5, to give up the piece for 2 pawns, but to exploit the uncomfortable position of the black king at e8. Probably he can play rook e1 and so on, or he could even use some ideas like knight e4 and other plans like knight f6 and so on, which will help us to expand his advantage towards this area. So this is something really important in my opinion that helps white to get many activities. So after the move of rook takes to d5, what black did in this case was rook c5. In my opinion, it's a simple mistake which black made, because he decides now to exchange pieces. Now, okay, maybe the white rook looks threatening right now on d5, but I want to give you something as an idea that even Grandmaster Yusupov did not realize in this game. Every time when we play a complex position, no matter if it's a middle game or end game or opening even, we have to be very careful about the so-called effectiveness of the pieces. Now, what do I mean by effectiveness? The activity of a given piece is where it's positioned, I mean, how advanced it is, how many squares does it control, and most importantly, what kind of threats it can make, or it is making. And the effectiveness of a given piece means the permanent role that the piece currently has. And this is very important because sometimes there are temporary well-placed, well-positioned pieces which look to be very powerful, but in fact, when you simply look at the opportunities to attack on those pieces, and so we can easily see that practically those pieces will lose their positions after they are attacked or some circumstances happen, so they don't have permanent roles. So what is very important is to take care about the pieces which have permanent roles, and they will certainly do something to support our position, and they will have more possibilities than those temporary pieces which don't seem to have that many resources within just a few moves, and they stay well just for now. So right now the white rook stays a little bit better than black's rook, but it's just a temporary active piece. It's not a really effective piece that controls some role, and white will tend to get a big advantage with it. So it is my opinion that black's rook should have gone to e3, and now we can see the difference between the rooks. The white rook on d5 doesn't help with white with anything, but the black rook from e3 can move on to e2, attack g2, and certainly his pieces will be well promoted. So after the 7th move of rook to e3, what could happen in the game? For example, let me show you. If white goes with knight f3, f1, black would do at this point the move of knight f3 check. Take a look at the tremendous coordination of the black pieces. This could happen, for instance, as an idea. And if the king comes to f2, now it seems that there is a double threat to the rook and knight in the same time. Well, black can just go with rook e5. There is no problem with it. He's not a piece down as previously. He's a pawn up. And now the exchange is not going to leave him with any weaknesses, but it's going to leave him with a very important centralized knight down there. So after, if white goes with knight rook takes c3, rook takes d5, knight takes d5, and knight e3, black will just jump with his king on e7. And as we know, the king happens to be a very important piece in the endgame. So gradually, black is going to utilize this extra pawn, which are the pawns on a7 and b6, especially the one on b6, against the one which white has on the a2. So little by little, he will expand his position, and his threats will come one after another. So we can literally say that this position is much better and more preferable for black. And for this reason, after the move of knight f3 check, black would have get an advantage. So white should not exchange the rooks. He has to go at this point with rook a to d1, but even here, black can play the simple rook takes to d5, rook takes to d5, rook to g5. Very nice move, utilizing the rook on that line. And practically it happens that if white just gets the rook down on d1, black can simply get the knight behind, and white hasn't got any compensation, any kind of equivalent for the pawn sacrifice. So right now we say that this was a very nice move, and especially about endgames, my advice is the following. Always think about coordinating your pieces. Now, a few days ago I got a question of a student, what is a coordinated piece? In the simplest position, coordination is something easy to know. Coordination is when the pieces stay connected and pretty much they are on more advanced positions. They play some role. They can interact together on those connected positions. So if we always try to keep our pieces connected, coordinated, and we don't keep them discoordinated, so they're not interacting together and they're pretty away one of each other, we are going to have much stronger play and a lot better threats and attacks than we can ever imagine. So the move of rook e3 was just necessary. Black put the rook on c5, and after rook takes to c5, b takes to c5, white did the simple knight e4, and it seems that black missed this simple double threat against c5 and f6 in the same time. So it happens that if black defends f6 with king e7, white will simply collect on that pawn, and black hasn't got anything here. He can't make any move like, say, knight f3 check, or because it's not going to give him anything, and the endgame is pretty equal at this point. So what was the black major mistake here? I don't think that he had a mistake. His strategy was totally correct. He destroyed the white center with g5. He followed them with the move of rook g8, activated all the pieces, but at the decisive moment where he had to utilize a simple rook e3, he missed that. Why? Because he thought about stabilizing of the position, and of course how to prevent any risks. And what I want to tell you is that, okay, maybe we need to prevent risks, but it doesn't mean that we have to play passively. Sometimes we can actually prevent risks by playing actively, by creating problems against the opponent, because when we create problems against this position, we don't give him that time to look for solutions to his own pieces and to look for other activities. So he has to solve his own problems which we create, and that is how our position may get stronger and richer, and we can create many ideas and upcoming threats. So my summary for that position is to explain you the positional operation of the playing with pawns, and of course formulating a nice and solid pawns formation. So my advice is mostly this: always try to ask yourself, how could I possibly attack on the opponent's central pawns? Now sometimes if the central control is equal, then you may not need to attack against the central pawns, but you may need to promote own pawns on the down squares. Imagine like in the Queen's Gambit, d4, d5, and then there is e3. Let's say black can play knight f6, and at some point you could promote knight c6 and e5. Of course, this is just an idea, but there are some other positions in which we can actually purposefully fight for the center, and that's what we have to do. If the opponent takes control of the center, then we fight against the center, intending to exchange on his pawns and take our control over it. The center of the board plays a more important area, an important role as an area, and it's a very good idea for us to destroy the opponent's pawns, to exchange them, and of course by limiting the possibility of his pawn structure, we expand the resources of our own pieces, and of course the activity goes much better. So that's what I can tell you. Thank you. This was FIDE Master Valery Lilov, and we'll see you next time.